we're back with The Restaurant at the End of the Universe by Douglas Adams. Sorry it took me a while to get back to this book. I have been moving and organizing life, but I know it's coming back to it. This is the sequel to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so if you've not heard my reading of that book, I highly recommend it. It's also in this channel. So, here we go. Where was I? 15th, said the elevator. And remember, I'm only doing this because I like your robot. Zaphod and Marvin bundled out of the elevator, which instantly snapped its doors shut and dropped as fast as its mechanism would take it. Zaphod looked around warily. The corridor was deserted and silent and gave no clue as to where Zarnavoot might be found. All the doors that led off the corridor were closed and unmarked. They were standing close to the bridge, which led across from one tower of the building to the other. Through a large window, the brilliant sun of Ursa Minor Beta threw blocks of light in which danced small specks of dust. A shadow flitted past momentarily. Left in the lurch by a lift, muttered Zaphod, who was feeling at his least jaunty. They both stood and looked in both directions. You know something, said Zaphod to Marvin. More than you can possibly imagine. I'm dead certain this building shouldn't be shaking, Zaphod said. It was just a light tremor through the soles of his feet, and another one. In the sunbeams, the flecks of dust danced more vigorously. Another shadow flitted past. Zaphod looked at the floor. Either, he said, not very confidently, they've got some vibro system for toning up your muscles while you work, or... He walked across to the window and suddenly stumbled because at that moment, his Joondalup 200 superchromatic peril-sensitive sunglasses had turned utterly black. A large shadow flitted past the window with a sharp buzz. Zaphod ripped off his glasses, and as he did so, the building shook with a thunderous roar. He leapt to the window. Or, he said, this building's being bombed. Another roar cracked through the building. Who in the galaxy would want to bomb a publishing company? Asked Zaphod, but never heard Marvin's reply because at that moment the building shook with another bomb attack. He tried to stagger back to the elevator, a pointless maneuver, he realized, but the only one he could think of. Suddenly, at the end of the corridor leading at right angles from this one, he caught sight of a figure as it lunged into view. A man saw him. Beeblebrox, over there, he shouted. Zaphod eyed him with distrust as another bomb blast rocked the building. No, called Zaphod. Beeblebrox, over here. Who are you? A friend, shouted back the man. He ran toward Zaphod. Oh, yeah, said Zaphod. Anyone's friend in particular, or just generally well-disposed to people? The man raced along the corridor, the floor bucking beneath his feet like an excited blanket. He was short, stocky, and weather-beaten, and his clothes looked as if they'd been twice around the galaxy and back with him in them. Do you know, Zaphod shouted in his ear when he arrived, your building's being bombed? The man indicated his awareness. It suddenly stopped being light, glancing around the window to see why Zaphod gaped as a huge slug-like gunmetal green spacecraft crept through the air past the building. Two more followed it. The government you deserted is out to get you, Zaphod, hissed the man. They've sent a squadron of Frogstar fighters. Frogstar fighters? Muttered Zaphod. Zarquan, you get the picture. What are Frogstar fighters? Zaphod was sure he'd heard someone talk about them when he was president, but he never paid much attention to official matters. The man was pulling him back through a door. He went with him. With a searing whine, a small black spider-like object shot through the air and disappeared down the corridor. "What was that?" hissed Zaphod. "Frog Star Scout, Robot Class A, out looking for you," said the man. "Hey, yeah, get down." From the opposite direction came a larger black spider-like object. It zapped past them. "And that was a Frog Star Scout, Robot Class B, out looking for you?" "And that," said Zaphod as a third one seared through the air. "A Frog Star Scout, Robot Class C, out looking for you." "Hey," chuckled Zaphod to himself. "Pretty stupid robots, eh?" From over the bridge came a massive rumbling hum. A gigantic black shape was moving over it from the opposite tower, the size and shape of a tank. "Holy photon, what was that?" breathed Zaphod. "A tank," said the man. "Frog Star Scout, Robot Class D, come to get ya." "Should we leave?" "I think we should." "Marvin," called Zaphod. "What do you want?" Marvin rose from a pile of rubble farther down the corridor and looked at them. "You see that robot coming toward us?" Marvin looked at the gigantic black shape edging forward toward them over the bridge. He looked down at his own small metal body. He looked back up at the tank. "I suppose you want me to stop it," he said. "Yeah." "While you save your skins?" "Yeah," said Zaphod. "Get in there." "Just so long," said Marvin, "as I know where I stand." The man tugged at Zaphod's arm, and Zaphod followed him off down the corridor. A point occurred to him about this. "Where are we going?" he said. "Zynewhoop's office." "Is this any time to keep an appointment? Come on." Chapter 7. Marvin stood at the end of the bridge corridor. He was not, in fact, a particularly small robot. His silver body gleamed in the dusty sunbeams and shook with the continual barrage which the building was still undergoing. He did, however, look pitifully small as the gigantic black tank rolled to a halt in front of him. The tank examined him with a probe. The probe withdrew. Marvin stood there. "Out of my way, little robot," growled the tank. "I'm afraid," said Marvin, "I've been left here to stop ya." The probe extended again for a quick recheck and withdrew again. "You? Stop me?" roared the tank. "Go on." "No, I really have," said Marvin simply. "What are you armed with?" roared the tank in disbelief. "Guess," said Marvin. The tank's engine rumbled. Its gears ground molecule-sized electronic relays deep in its microbrain, flipped backward and forward in consternation. "Guess," said the tank. Zaphod and the as-yet unnamed man lurched up one corridor, down a second, and along a third. The building continued to rock and shudder, and this puzzled Zaphod. They wanted to blow the building up. Why was it taking so long? With difficulty, they reached one of a number of totally anonymous, unmarked doors and heaved at it. With a sudden jolt, it opened, and they fell inside. All this way, thought Zaphod, all this trouble, all this, not lying on the beach having a wonderful time, and for what? A single chair, a single desk, and a single dirty ashtray in an undecorated office, the desk apart from a bit of dancing dust, and a single revolutionary new form of paperclip was empty. "Where," said Zaphod, "is Zynewhoop?" Feeling that his already tenuous grasp of the point of his whole exercise was beginning to slip. "He's on an intergalactic cruise," said the man. Zaphod tried to size the man up, earnest type, he thought, not a barrel of laughs. He probably apportioned a fair whack of his time on to running up and down heaving corridors, breaking down doors, and making cryptic remarks in empty offices. "Let me introduce myself," the man said. "My name is Rooster, and this is my towel." "Hello, Rooster," said Zaphod. "Hello, towel," he added as Rooster held out to him a rather nasty old flowery towel. Not knowing what to do with it, he shook it by the corner. Outside the window of one of the huge slug-like gunmetal green spaceships growled past. "Yes, go on," said Marvin to the huge battle machine. "You'll never guess." Said the machine, vibrating with unaccustomed thought laser beams. Marvin shook his head solemnly. "No," muttered the machine in its deep guttural rumble. "Too obvious. Antimatter ray." It hazarded. Far too obvious. "I will get my words together," admonished Marvin. "Yes," grumbled the machine, somewhat abashed. How about an electronic ram?" This was new to Marvin. "What's that?" he said. "One of these," said the machine with enthusiasm. From its turret emerged a sharp prong which spat a single lethal blaze of light. Behind Marvin, a wall roared and collapsed as a heap of dust. The dust billowed briefly and then settled. "No," said Marvin, "not one of those." "Good, though, isn't it?" "Very good," agreed Marvin. "I know," said the Frog Star battle machine after another moment's consideration. "You must have one of those new xanthic restriction destabilized xenon emitters. Nice, aren't they?" said Marvin. "That's what you got?" said the machine in considerable awe. "No," said Marvin. "Oh," said the machine, disappointed. "Then it must be. You're thinking along the wrong lines," said Marvin. "You're failing to take into account something fairly basic in the relationship between men and robots." I know," said the battle machine. "Is it—" It trailed off into thought again. "Just think," urged Marvin. "They left me an ordinary menial robot to stop you, a gigantic heavy-duty battle machine, while they ran off to save themselves. What do you think they would leave me with?" Muttered the machine in alarm. "Something pretty damn devastating, I should expect." "Expect?" said Marvin. "Oh yes, expect. I'll tell you what they gave me to protect myself with. Shall I?" "Yes, all right," said the battle machine, bracing itself. "Nothing," said Marvin. There was a dangerous pause. "Nothing?" roared the battle machine. "Nothing at all," intoned Marvin dismally. "Not an electronic sausage?" The machine heaved about with fury. "Well, doesn't that just take the biscuit?" it roared. "Nothing, eh? Just don't think, do they?" "And me," said Marvin in a soft, low voice, "with this terrible pain and all the diodes down my left side. Makes you spit, doesn't it?" "Yes," agreed Marvin with feeling. "Hell, that makes me angry," bellowed the machine. "Think I'll smash that wall down." The electronic ram stabbed out another searing blaze of light and took out the wall next to the machine. "How do you think I feel, said Marvin bitterly. Lost, just ran off and left you, did they? The machine thundered. Yes. I think I'll shoot down their bloody ceiling as well, raged the tank. It took out the ceiling of the bridge. It's very impressive, murmured Marvin. You ain't seen nothing yet, promised the machine. I can take out this floor too, no problem. It took out the floor too. Hell's bells, the machine roared as it plummeted 15 stories and smashed itself to bits on the floor on the ground below. Blah, 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 blah. I know words, sorry. The more tired I am, the worse my dyslexia gets, I've noticed. What a depressingly stupid machine, said Marvin and trudged away. Chapter 8. Alright, I'm gonna get some sleep and I will finish this video tomorrow because I am way exhausted, and yes, I'm just gonna keep blurring all my words together if I try right now. So, namaste. I shall see you in the morning. Alright, sorry y'all. I was way too sleepy last night to do the book. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to pick this up later. So, where were we? Chapter 8. So, do we just sit here or what? Said Zaphod angrily. What do these guys out here want? You, Beeble Brox, said Rooster. They're going to take you to the Frog Star, the most totally evil world in the galaxy. Oh, yeah, said Zaphod. They'll have to come and get me first. They have come and got you, said Rooster. Look at the window. Zaphod looked and gaped. The ground's going away, he gasped. Where are they taking the ground? Taking the building, said Rooster. We're airborne. Cloud streaked past the office window, out in the open air again. Zaphod could see the ring of dark green frog star fighters around the uprooted tower of the building. A network of force beams radiated in from them and held the tower in a firm grip. Zaphod shook his head in perplexity. What have I done to deserve this? He said. I walk into a building and they take it away. It's not what you've done they're worried about, said Rooster. It's what you're going to do. Well, don't I get to saying that? You did. Years ago. You'd better hold on. We're going in for a fast and bumpy journey. If I ever meet myself, said Zaphod, I'll hit myself so hard I won't know what's hit me. Marvin trudged in through the door, looked at Zaphod accusingly, slumped in a corner, and switched himself off. On the bridge of the Heart of Gold, all was silent. Arthur stared at the rack in front of him and thought he caught Trillian's eyes as she looked at him inquiringly. He looked back at the rack. Finally he saw it. He picked up 5 small plastic squares and laid them on the board that lay just in front of the rack. 5 squares had on them the 5 letters E, X, Q, U, and I. He laid them next to the letters S-I-T-E. Exquisite, he said. On a triple word score. Score's rather a lot, I'm afraid. The ship bumped and scattered some of the letters for the nth time. Trillian sighed and started to sort them out again. Up and down the silent corridors echoed Ford Prefect's beat as they stalked the ship, thumping dead instruments. Why did this ship keep shaking, he thought. Why did it rock and sway? Why could he not find out where they were? Where basically were they? The left-hand tower of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy offices streaked through interstellar space at a speed never equaled before or since by any other office block in the universe. In a room halfway up it, Zaphod Beeblebrox strode angrily. Rooster sat on the edge of the desk doing some routine towel maintenance. "Hey, where did you say this building was flying to?" demanded Zaphod. "The Frog Star," said Rooster. "The most totally evil place in the world, or in the universe." "Do they have food there?" said Zaphod. "Food? You're going to the Frog Star and you're worried about whether they've got food." "Without food, I may not make it to the Frog Star." Out of the window they could see nothing but the flickering light of the force beams and big green streaks, which were presumably the distorted shapes of the Frog Star fighters. At this speed, space itself was invisible, and indeed unreal. "Here, suck this," said Rooster, offering Zaphod his towel. Zaphod stared at him as if he expected a cuckoo to leap out of his forehead on a small spring. "It's soaked in nutrients," explained Rooster. "What are you, a messy eater or something?" said Zaphod. "The yellow stripes are high in protein. The green ones have vitamin B and C complex. The little pink flowers contain wheat germ extract." Zaphod took and looked at it in amazement. "What are the brown stains?" he asked. "Barbecue sauce," said Rooster. "When I get sick of wheat germ." Zaphod sniffed it doubtfully. Even more doubtfully, he sucked a corner. He spat it out again. "Ah," he stated. "Yes," said Rooster. "When I've had to suck that end, I usually need to suck the other end a bit too." "Why?" asked Zaphod suspiciously. "What's in that?" "Antidepressants," said Rooster. I've gone right off this towel, you know," said Zaphod, handing it back. Rooster took it back from him, swung himself off the desk, walked around it, sat in the chair, and put his feet up. "Beeblebrox," he said, sticking his hands behind his head. "Have you any idea what's going to happen to you on the Frog Star?" "They're going to feed me?" hazarded Zaphod hopefully. "They're going to feed you," said Rooster, "into the total perspective vortex." Zaphod had never heard of this. He believed that he had heard of all the fun things in the galaxy, so he assumed that the total perspective vortex was not fun. As he asked Rooster what it was. "Only," said Rooster, "the most savage psychic torture a sentient being can undergo." Zaphod nodded, a resigned nod. "So," he said, "no food, huh?" "Listen," said Rooster urgently. "You can kill a man, destroy his body, break his spirit, but only the total perspective vortex can annihilate a man's soul. The treatment lasts seconds, but the effects last the rest of your life." "You ever had a pan-galactic gargle blaster?" asked Zaphod sharply. "This is worse," admitted Zaphod, much impressed. "Any idea why these guys might want to do this to me?" he added a moment later. "They believe it will be the best way of destroying you forever. They know what you're after." "Could they drop me a note and let me know as well?" "You know," said Rooster. "You know, Beeblebrox. You want to meet the man who rules the universe. Can he cook?" said Zaphod. On reflection, he added, "I doubt if he can. If he could cook a good meal, he wouldn't worry about the rest of the universe. I want to meet a cook." Rooster sighed heavily. "What are you doing here anyway?" demanded Zaphod. "What's all this got to do with you?" "I'm just one of those who planned this thing, along with Zonawhoop, along with the Uden Bronx, along with your great-grandfather, along with you, Beeblebrox. Me? Yes, you. I was told you had changed. I didn't realize how much. But I'm here to do one job. I will do it before I leave you. What job, man? What are you talking about? I will do it before I leave you. Rooster lapsed into an impenetrable silence. Zaphod was terribly glad. Chapter 9. Get some coffee in me. The air on the second planet of the Frog Star system was stale and unwholesome. The dank winds that swept continually over its surface swept over the salt flats, and dried up marshland tangled in rotting vegetation and the crumbling remains of the ruined cities. No life moved across its surface. The ground, like that of many planets in this part of the galaxy, had long been deserted. The howl of the wind was desolate enough as it gusted through the old decaying houses of the city. It was more desolate as it whipped about the bottoms of the tall black towers that swayed uneasily here and there about the surface of this world. At the top of these towers lived colonies of large, scraggy, evil-smelling birds, the sole survivors of the civilization that once lived here. The howl of the wind was at its most desolate, however, when it passed over a pimple of a place set in the middle of a wide gray plain on the outskirts of the largest of the abandoned cities. This pimple of a place was the thing that had earned this world the reputation of being the most totally evil place in the galaxy. From without it was simply a steel dome about 30 feet across. From within, it was something more monstrous than the mind can comprehend. About 100 yards or so away, and separated from it by a pockmarked and blasted stretch of the most barren land imaginable, was what would probably have to be described as a landing pad of sorts. That is to say, that scattered over a largish area were the ungainly hulks of 2 or 3 dozen crash-landed buildings. Flitting over and around these buildings was a mind that was waiting for something. The mind directed its attention into the air, and before very long, a distant speck appeared, surrounded by a ring of smaller specks. The larger speck was the left-hand tower of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy office building, descending through the stratosphere of Frogstar World B. As it descended, Rooster suddenly broke the long, uncomfortable silence that had grown up between the two men. He stood up and gathered his towel into a bag and said, "Beeblebrox, I will now do the job I was sent here to do." Zaphod looked up at him from where he was sitting in a corner, sharing unspoken thoughts with Marvin. "Yeah?" she said. "The building will shortly be landing. When you leave the building, do not go out of the door," he said. "Go out of the window. Good luck," he added, and walked out of the door, disappearing from Zaphod's life as mysteriously as he entered it. Zaphod leapt up and tried the door, but Rooster had already locked it. He shrugged and returned to the corner. 2 minutes later, the building crash-landed amongst the other wreckage. Its escort of the Frogstar fighters deactivated their force beams and soared off into the air again, bound for Frogstar World A, an altogether more congenial spot. They never landed on Frogstar World B. No one did. No one ever walked on its surface other than the intended victims of the total perspective vortex. Zaphod was badly shaken by the crash. He lay a while in the silent, dusty rubble to which most of the room had been reduced. He felt that he was at the lowest ebb he had ever reached in his life. He felt bewildered. He felt lonely. He felt unloved. Eventually, he felt he ought to get whatever it was over with. He looked around the cracked and broken room. The wall had split around the door frame. The door hung open. The window, by some miracle, was closed and unbroken. For a while he hesitated, then he thought that if his strange and recent companion had been through all that he had been through just to tell him what he had told him, then there must be a good reason for it. With Marvin's help he got the window open. Outside it, the cloud of dust aroused by the crash and the hulks of the other buildings with which this one was surrounded effectively prevented Zaphod from seeing anything of the world outside. Not that this concerned him unduly, that his main concern was what he saw when he looked down. Zonnewoop's office was on the 15th floor. The building had landed at a tilt of about 45 degrees, but still the descent looked heart-stopping. Eventually stung by the continuous series of contemptuous looks that Marvin appeared to be giving him, he took a deep breath and clambered out onto the steeply inclined side of the building. Marvin followed him, and together they began to crawl slowly and painfully down the 15 floors that separated them from the ground. As he crawled, the dank air and dust choked his lungs. His eyes smarted, and the terrific distance down made his head spin. The occasional remark from Marvin of the order of, "This is the sort of thing you life forms enjoy, is it? I ask merely for information," did little to improve his state of mind. About halfway down the side of the shattered building, they stopped to rest. It seemed to Zaphod, as he lay there, panting with fear and exhaustion, that Marvin seemed a mite more cheerful than usual. Eventually, he realized this wasn't so. The robot just seemed cheerful in comparison to his own mood. A large, scraggy blackbird came flapping through the slowly settling clouds of dust, and stretching down its scrawny legs, landed on an inclined window ledge. A couple of yards from Zaphod, it folded its ungainly wings and teetered awkwardly on its perch. Its wingspan must have been something like 6 feet. Its head and neck seemed curiously large for a bird. Its base was flat, the beak was underdeveloped, and halfway along the underside of its wings, the vestiges of something hand-like could be clearly seen. In fact, it almost looked human. It turned its heavy eyes on Zaphod and clicked its beak in a desultory fashion. "Go away," said Zaphod. "Okay," muttered the bird morosely, and flapped off into the dust again. Zaphod watched its departure in bewilderment. Did that bird just talk to me?" he asked Marvin nervously. He was quite prepared to believe the alternative explanation, that he was in fact hallucinating. "Yes," confirmed Marvin. "Poor souls," said a deep, ethereal voice in Zaphod's ear. Twisting around violently to find the source of the voice nearly caused Zaphod to fall off the building. He grabbed savagely at the protruding window fitting and cut his hand on it. He hung on. Breathing heavily, the voice had no visible source whatsoever. There was no one there. Nevertheless, it spoke again. "A tragic history behind them, a terrible blight." Zaphod looked wildly about. The voice was deep and quiet. In other circumstances, it would even be described as soothing. There is, however, nothing soothing about being addressed by a disembodied voice out of nowhere, particularly when you are, like Zaphod Beeblebrox, not at your best and hanging from a ledge 8 stories up a crashed building. Hey, he stammered. Shall I tell you their story? Inquired the voice quietly. Hey, who are you? Panted Zaphod. Where are... Later then, perhaps, murmured the voice. I am Gargravar. I am the custodian of the total perspective vortex. Why can't I see? You will find your progress down the building greatly facilitated. The voice lifted. If you move about 2 yards to your left, why don't you try it? Zaphod looked and saw a series of short horizontal grooves leading all the way down the side of the building. Gratefully, he shifted himself across to them. Why don't I see you again at the bottom? Said the voice in his ear, and as it spoke it faded. Hey, called out Zaphod, where are you? It'll only take you a couple minutes, said the voice very faintly. Marvin, said Zaphod earnestly to the robot squatting dejectedly next to him. Did a voice just... Yes, Marvin replied tersely. Zaphod nodded. He took out his peril-sensitive sunglasses again, and they were completely black and by now quite badly scratched by the unexpected metal object in his pocket. He put them on. He would find his way down the building more comfortably if he didn't have to actually look at what he was doing. Minutes later, he clambered over the ripped and mangled foundations of the building, and once more removing his sunglasses, he dropped to the ground. Marvin joined him a moment or so later, and lay face down in the dust and rubble, from which position he seemed disinclined to move. Ah, there you are, said the voice suddenly in Zaphod's ear. Excuse me, leaving you like that. It's, just that I have a terrible head for heights, at least. It added wistfully. I did have a terrible head for heights. And Zaphod looked around slowly and carefully, just to see if he had missed something, which might be the source of the voice. All he saw, however, was dust, the rubble, and the towering hulks of the encircling buildings. Hey, why can't I see you? He said. Why aren't you here? I am here, said the voice slowly. My body wanted to come, but it's a bit busy at the moment. Things to do, people to see. After what seemed like a sort of ethereal sigh, it added, You know how it is with bodies. Zaphod wasn't sure about this. I thought I did, he said. I only hope it's gone in for a rest cure, continued the voice. The way it's been living recently, it must be on its last elbows. Elbows, said Zaphod. Do you mean last legs? The voice said nothing for a while. Zaphod looked around uneasily. He didn't know if it had gone, or was still there, or what it was doing. Then the voice spoke again. So, are you to be put into the vortex, yes? Well, said Zaphod with very poor attempt at nonchalance. This cat's in no hurry, you know. I can just slouch about and take in a look at the local scenery, you know. Have you seen the local scenery? Asked the voice of Gargravar. No. Zaphod clambered over the rubble and rounded the corner of one of the wrecked buildings that was obscuring his view. He looked out at the landscape of Frogstar World B. Ah, okay, he said. I'll just sort of slouch about then. No, said Gargavar. The vortex is ready for you now. You must come, follow me. Yeah, said Zaphod, and how am I meant to do that? I'll hum for you, said Gargavar, followed the humming. A soft keening sound drifted through the air, a pale, sad sound that seemed to be without any kind of focus. It was only by listening very carefully that Zaphod was able to detect the direction from which it was coming. Slowly, dazedly, he stumbled off in its wake. What else was there to do? Chapter 10. The universe, as it had been observed before, is an unsettlingly big place. A fact which, for the sake of a quiet life, most people tend to ignore. Many would happily move to somewhere rather smaller of their own devising, and this is what most beings in fact do. For instance, in one corner of the eastern galactic arm lies the large forest planet Oglaroon, the entire intelligent population of which lives permanently in one fairly small and crowded nut tree, in which they are born, live, fall in love, carve tiny speculative articles in the bark on the meaning of life, the futility of death, and the importance of birth control, fight a few extremely minor wars, and eventually die strapped to the underside of some of the less accessible outer branches. In fact, the only Oglaroonians who ever leave their tree are those who are hurled out of it for their heinous crime of wondering whether any of the other trees might be capable of supporting life at all, or, indeed, whether the other trees are anything other than illusions brought on by eating too many oglanuts. Exotic though this behavior may seem, there is no life form in the galaxy which is not in some way guilty of the same thing, which is why the total perspective vortex is as horrific as it is. For when you are put into the vortex, you are given just one momentary glimpse of the entire unimaginable infinity of creation, and somewhere in it, a tiny little marker, a microscopic dot on a microscopic dot, which says, you are here. The great plain stretched before Zaphod, a ruined, shattered plain. The wind whipped wildly over it. Visible in the middle was the steel pimple of the dome. This, gathered Zaphod, was where he was going. This was the total perspective vortex. As he stood and gazed bleakly at it, a sudden inhuman wail of terror emanated from it, as of a man having his soul burned from his body. It screamed above the wind and died away. Zaphod started with fear, and his blood seemed to turn to liquid helium. Hey, what was that? He muttered voicelessly. A recording, said Gargavar, of the last man who was put in the vortex. It is always played to the next victim, a sort of prelude. Hey, it really sounds bad, stammered Zaphod. Couldn't we maybe slip off to a party or something for a while? Think it over. Oh, hold up. For all I know, said Gargavar's ethereal voice, I'm probably at one. My body, that is. It goes to a lot of parties without me. It says I only get in the way. Hey ho. What is all this with your body? Said Zaphod, anxious to delay whatever it was that was going to happen to him. Well, it's busy, you know, said Gargavar hesitantly. You mean it's got a mind of its own? Said Zaphod. There was a long and slightly chilly pause before Gargavar spoke again. I have to say, he replied eventually, I find that remark in rather poor taste. Zaphod muttered a bewildered and embarrassed apology. No matter, said Gargavar, you weren't to know. The voice fluttered unhappily. The truth is, it continued in tones which suggested he was trying very hard to keep it under control. The truth is that we are currently undergoing a period of a legal trial separation. I suspect it will end in divorce. The voice was still again, leaving Zaphod with no idea of what to say. He mumbled uncertainly. I think we were probably not very well suited, said Gargavar again at length. We never seemed to be happy doing the same things. We always had the greatest arguments over sex and fishing. Eventually, we tried to combine the two, but that only led to disaster, as you can probably imagine. And now my body refuses to let me in. It won't even see me. He paused again. Tragically, the wind whipped across the plain. It says I only inhabit it. I pointed out that, in fact, I was meant to inhabit it, and it said that was exactly the sort of smart-aleck remark that got right up a body's left nostril, and so we left it. I will probably get custody of my forename. Oh, said Zaphod faintly. And what's that? Pisspot, said the voice. My name is Pisspot Gargavar. Says it all, really, doesn't it? Said Zaphod sympathetically. And that is why I, as a disembodied mind, have this job, custodian of the total perspective vortex. No one will ever walk around on the ground of this planet, except the victims of the vortex. They don't really count, I'm afraid. I'll tell you this story. Would you like to hear it? Many years ago, this was a thriving, happy planet. People, cities, shops, a normal world, except that on the high streets of these cities, there were slightly more shoe shops than one might have thought necessary, and slowly, insidiously, the numbers of these shoe shops were increasing. It's a well-known economic phenomenon, but tragic to see it in operation, for the more shoe shops there were, the more shoes they had to make, and the worse and more unwearable they became. And the worse they were to wear, the more people had to buy to keep themselves shod. And the more the shops proliferated, until the whole economy of the place passed what I believe is termed the shoe event horizon, and it became no longer economically possible to build anything other than shoe shops. The result, collapse, ruin, and famine. Most of the population died out. Those few who had the right kind of genetic instability mutilated into birds. You've seen one of them who cursed their feet, cursed the ground, and vowed that none should walk on it again. Unhappy lot. Come, I must take you into the vortex. Zaphod shook his head in bemusement and stumbled forward across the plain. And you, he said, you come from this hellhole pit, do you? No, said Gargavar, taken aback. I come from Frogstar World Sea. Beautiful place, wonderful fishing. I flip back there in the evenings, though all I can do now is watch. The total perspective vortex is the only thing on this planet with any function. It was built here because no one else wanted it on their doorstep. At that moment, another dismal scream rent the air, and Zaphod shuddered. What can do that to a guy? He breathed. universe, said Gargavar simply. The whole infinite universe. The infinite suns, the infinite distances between them and yourself, an invisible dot on an invisible dot, infinitely small. Hey, I'm Zaphod Beeblebrox, man. You know? Muttered Zaphod, trying to flap the last remnants of his ego. Gargavar made no reply, but merely resumed his mournful humming till they reached the tarnished steel dome in the middle of the plain. As they reached it, a door hummed open in the side, revealing a small darkened chamber within it. Enter, said Gargavar. Zaphod started with fear. Hey, what now? Now, Zaphod peered nervously inside. The chamber was very small. It was steel-lined, and there was hardly space in it for more than one man. It doesn't look like any kind of vortex to me, said Zaphod. It isn't, said Gargavar. It's just the elevator. Enter. With infinite trepidation, Zaphod stepped into it. He was aware of Gargavar being in the elevator with him, though the disembodied man was not for the moment speaking. The elevator began its descent. I must get myself into the right frame of mind for this, muttered Zaphod. There is no right frame of mind, said Gargavar sternly. You really know how to make a guy feel inadequate. I don't. The vortex does. At the moment of the shaft, the rear of the elevator opened up, and Zaphod stumbled out into a smallish, functional, steel-lined chamber. At the far side of it stood a single upright steel box, just large enough for a man to stand in. It was that simple. It connected to a small pile of components and instruments via a single thick wire. Is that it? Said Zaphod in surprise. That is it. Didn't look too bad, thought Zaphod. And I'm getting there, do I? Said Zaphod. You getting there, said Gargavar. And I'm afraid you must do it now. Okay, said Zaphod. He opened the door of the box, stepped in. Inside the box he waited. After 5 seconds there was a click, and the entire universe was there in the box with him. Alright, we're going to stop here. Leave you on a cliffhanger. And I will get back to this as soon as possible. Again, sorry for the delays on the reading, but I will be more up on them. I'll be doing them more frequently now. So, namaste, I love you guys, and I'll see you soon.